All right, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Delina COF. Guess I'm calling Delina. I'm going to be talking about texting culture. I chose this topic because I believe that it's a topic that everyone can relate to since we all text. So, my main claim is texting culture is negatively influencing the evolution of the English language. Now, to give you a bit of context on what I mean by texting culture, it's basically language that we use, in instant messaging and in social media. So, texting has been considered acceptable informal ways of communication to the extent where it's starting to eliminate the correct interpretation of the English language. Of course, some of you may argue that the influence of texting culture on the English language is just part of the evolution of English, but I would like to address that it is affecting it in a negative way rather than a positive. I will be addressing two secondary claims. My first one being that texting culture is almost eliminating the way English language is written and interpreted, as well as texting is negatively changing the way English language is used by the older generation. So my first secondary claim, I will first elaborate on how texting culture is eliminating the English language, the way English language is written, sorry. So texting is developing its own grammar and conventions, and there's obviously very little use of capitalization and punctuations in dialogues during instant messaging. Yes, the whole point of instant messaging is to increase the speed of conversation, but the harm in the development of new language in texting is that, but the harm in the development of new language in texting is that with the incorrect use of English is becoming habitual to the point where we are now using it in formal communications. Texting language is also constantly growing at the basis of use of abbreviations, which are now considered part of the English language. What I mean by abbreviations is things like LOL, OMG, AO. There is a HuffPost blog which is written by Paul Jury. Paul Jury is also an author of a book called Space of Confusion, and he claims that the English Oxford Dictionary is now including these abbreviations that we use in text messaging. These basically are now considered as part of the English language. Also, inclusion of texting abbreviations in the dictionary is negatively affecting the younger age groups who are not entirely familiar with the difference between texting language and the English language. This inclusion suggests that the texting language is the right form of English, and this will lead to the proper use of English being appreciated less and less and eventually neglected. A blog called English Town states that there have been statistics showing that in the US, school children in the 1960s and 70s were far more literate than children are today. In 2013, the average school child struggles more with spelling, grammar, and essay writing. And these skills of spelling, grammar, and essay writing were only, in the 1960s and 70s, were only considered a good grasp of the English language, whereas today is now considered, they are now considered as essential skills. This basically shows how texting has really influenced how children perform regarding English grammar and writing. Now moving on to how texting culture is affecting the way the English language is interpreted. We see some components of the English language are being eliminated. One example I'm going to use is the hyphen in English grammar. I think I don't need to explain what the hyphen is. Um, so we've seen that the hyphen has become obsolete to the extent where it is no longer used to define words in the English dictionary. Now, another blog called Writing Matters by Leslie Overhaven claims that Angus Stevenson, who is the editor of the shorter Oxford English Dictionary, ditched over 16,000 hyphens in the 6th edition of the Oxford Dictionary, which was released in September 2007. So he states that people are not confident about using hyphens anymore, and they're not really sure what they're used for. And this, of course, this confusion is caused by constant use of texting. Moving on to my secondary claim, we see that older people are now using texting in formal user communication, and this is mainly because people have been conforming to this type of language because of laziness. Also, texting language is also negatively affecting the development of literature, and because of this, older generation seems to appreciate less and less of the importance of English language in literature. But to conclude, I believe that texting language should still be used only during social interactions and not part of formal communication. And I believe that it should not influence the way the English language is evolving. Thank you.
Is that outline for me that you just took back to your desk? You gave me one? I don't have it. I gave out the one that you gave me to pass out, but I don't have another one for myself. So you'll need to make sure that you get me one at some point. All right, there we go. All right, well, the proposition's clearly identified, and you have a good preview of what the supporting points are going to be. You spent a lot of time on the first point, so you barely get to that second point, so you're going to have to find a way to kind of focus your argument and make it a little bit sharper and use the evidence a little bit more effectively in building your argument. A lot of explanations, a lot of background. Sometimes I understand that there's a need for the explanation, but I think most people probably understood the criticism that you're making. The harm is still what needs to be quantified or explained in some way. The evidence that you cited on the first point mostly consists of citations from blog pages, and if a couple of the authors sound like they have some official title, and so that sounds like it's perhaps a little bit more legitimate, although I'd have to look into it. The one piece of data that had some factual data in it about the 16,000 hyphens that disappeared from the dictionary, I thought that was kind of interesting, but again, it's like a secondary source that we're getting there, and one of the things that I think is problematic is that you just make the inference that that's related to the texting culture, not simply related to the fact that people aren't necessarily taught very well about how hyphens work. I'm not sure why it is assumed that it's related to texting, because it didn't sound like it was in the quote. It sounded like it was an inference that you were drawing. That's one of the reasons why you want to make sure that you use complete quotes, by the way. I'm still trying to figure out the the harm or the impact of these things. It sounds like the second point suggests that there'll be a loss of interest in literature, so that sounds like it would develop a harm pretty effectively, but you don't really get much time to work on that one because you run out of time on the first one. The sources were cited pretty consistently. Like I said, I'm not always sure that they are the most desirable sources. I do think you're making some big inferential leaps on some of those points, and you might want to be careful about that. The presentation, just a couple of things. You're going to need to project a little bit more. You've got one of the quiet voices. The room is a little big, and a lot of people are sitting back from the front. I'm sitting right up front, and even though I'm old, I have pretty good hearing. So it was still tough for me sometimes to stay as focused on what you're talking about. You don't have to shout, but you're going to have to kind of pump the volume up a little bit, maybe a couple of clicks on the knob, as they say. And then it's, again, not a big deal for our purposes, but one of the things that you'll want to watch is your nonverbal delivery issues. You've got nervous hands, and that's where your energy's coming out. So maybe focus on that when you're doing your presentations next time. All right, thank you.